with whom we cooperate in many issues, but in particular with SDGs. And we also, it's co-moderated by also a young person and with the participants, but Jennifer is going to present the whole panel. There are small differences compared to your program, but she's going to introduce a very important issue, the issue in this institution, because it's numerically the biggest, as you know, out of the 7 million de facto deprived of liberty. Moreover, 4 million is institutions. So it's a huge issue still today. Jennifer, the floor is yours to present the panel.
Thank you so much, Alex, and good afternoon to everyone, to all of you. We're so pleased that you're here and so pleased to have an opportunity to think together about what the advancements have been since the global study and what we can learn for the next phase to accelerate the progress that's needed on institutions and children, particularly in institutions for care purposes. So as Alex mentioned, my name is Jennifer Davidson. I'm a professor at the University of Strathclyde in Scotland. I also have the pleasure of convening the SDG 16 working group on justice for children. And we are keen to be a part of and eager to be seeing progress on a growing global movement on people-centered justice, where we continue to remind governments and other high ambition coalition members that children also are a part of justice for all, as Atiana was saying earlier. I am so thrilled that I am not moderating this myself, but I get to introduce you to my co-moderator. Kira Din is a child rights advocate from the Netherlands with special interests in international relations. And Kira will talk us through the purpose of this session and take us through the introductions of the panel. We'll introduce each of the panel members before we ask them their questions, and we're hopeful to make this quite interactive. So Kira, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Professor Davidson, for having me here. I would like to share the... Can everyone hear me? Okay. I would like to share the purpose of the session. This panel and breakout session will explore the eliminations of institutions for children's care through two lenses. The first is with understanding the systems transformation approaches. We will explore how to ensure children safely remain within their families and communities. And secondly, in recognizing the limitations of social services delivery approaches. This is an accountability lens. Will help us to better understand how children and institutions can hold states and public services accountable for their decisions. This session will focus on the experiences and views of people with particular experiences of the care systems, seeking to inspire change from examples of good practices.
Thanks, Kira. And as we heard this morning, there are many good examples of strengthening social protection and child protection systems to deinstitutionalize systems for children. But at the same time, in many countries, states are putting children into institutions allegedly for protection measures, but which we know are harmful and are a form of structural violence. I'd like to remind us that the UN Global Study indicates that institutions are defined by a number of characteristics, and you will know this, but it feels important for us to bring that into our mind as we start. It's where children are isolated from the broader community, where they are compelled to live together, where they do not have sufficient control over their lives and decisions, and where care is not individualized. And our collective focus is, of course, to eliminate all forms of care that have these characteristics. And so today we have a fantastic panel exploring, as Kira was saying, both systems transformation approaches, but also accountability measures. And our first speaker I'm delighted to invite to the panel is Jaden Habibi, who is a Dutch child rights advocate and a law student. Take note, Ton Leipard, and from Leiden. For a future. And here's our question, which we've prepared in advance, and we are keen to hear from Jaden. Jaden, you've lived in the alternative or the youth care system in the Netherlands. Can you tell us, as we begin our session today, what's most important for us to have in our minds today and what needs to change? Over to you, Jaden.
So firstly, I would like to ask for your understanding. It has been 1 year that I've been out of the foster system, the institutions. So I'm still processing a lot of traumas I experienced. So if it takes some longer for me to find words, that's the reason. Um, to give a good explanation, I would like to explain my first encounter with the care system in the Netherlands. So it actually began when I was 7 years old. Um, Actually, my mom, she was single and she had 4 kids. So I have 3 siblings. And um, as you can imagine, if you're poor, clothes, food, you don't have access to it. So it's really difficult. And it was at our family came over for the weekend, and all of a sudden we heard a loud knocking noise on the door. So we opened the door, and there were standing 7 police officers at our doorstep, and two CPS workers, and they were telling us, "Yeah, you have to take. We are taking the kids away from you to my mom." So we had to leave our home and we didn't know what was happening. It was very strange. I had no idea. My mom was crying and they were telling her like, yeah, it isn't, it's just, they were downplaying it, the CPS workers. And I remember my sister was screaming and we didn't want to leave. So they had to drag us out of our home. And then the CPS workers, they placed us in a vehicle and I remember her telling me like, yeah, we're going on a trip. And I kept asking, yeah, can I go back with my mom? But she ignored me. So she drove us to a secret location. We couldn't know, and my mom too. So then my siblings and I arrived at our first foster home. And within the first 2 weeks, the own foster parents, they had 2 foster kids besides us. And in the first 2 weeks, they were abusing their own foster children. So we had to be placed in another home. But the CPS worker, they didn't believe us when we told her, like, we were being abused here. So it took some time for us to be placed in another foster home or institution. And then we were placed in another institution. And I remember my siblings being separated. It's because one couple says, "Oh, I want a boy. Oh, I want a girl." So actually, my older sister and my little sister were placed in different institutions. So I was separated from them, and luckily I was with my brother, and we were placed in a foster home. And what was really crazy, from the moment I was in the foster system or in the institution, you have no autonomy over your own life. CPS decides over all over, like they decide over everything in your life. So from how often you see your family, I could see my family once in a month. That was normal for other kids too. And it was really crazy because when you ask me what is important, it's important for me to look what's happening now in institutions, because in my country, there are right now 40,000 kids in the foster system away from home. So those out of home placements, being dragged out of your home, it's common, it's normal here. And it's really traumatizing. And actually, in my foster home, I experienced abuse with my brother. um, my brother was with me, but the foster parents, they abused us. So it was physically, I had no privacy. They would check in my room when I was away. The foster dad had anger attacks, so he would shout at me, and it became normal for me. And eventually, he started an orphanage for other kids. And as you could expect, the kids in the orphanage were abused too. And that was the first time I saw other kids in the system. And I saw around me that it was normal that so many children had the same experience as I. So it isn't a incident. It happens a lot. And actually there is a report of Commission de Winter, and it states that 75% of the children and teens in the Dutch youth care system are being abused. And people are still placing them in the system, thinking they are doing the right thing. So actually, in the orphanage, it was really hard to survive because when you're abused in those institutions, the first thing the abusers tell you is, yeah, if you speak out, you will get consequences. So no one dares to speak a word, and if you do, you will get punished. You will get placed in another place which is worse, or you will get other consequences. So you will be intimidated or scared to speak out. And I remember my lawyer actually says they killed the messenger. And I have experience with it too, because when I was in my um, foster home, I stood up for myself because you could apply for uh, a compensation if you experienced abuse, child abuse. And you could do it in the Netherlands, and a lot of children applied for it. But my foster parents, they said, oh, you're not eligible because you're, to our opinion, you're not abused. So I had to name reasons why I was abused, and they had to check if it was good enough for them. So they said, no, that's not a good reason. No. And I had no freedom. So actually, I ended up applying for it, and they sent a letter to my home. Um, and in the letter, it said I would get the compensation or for the abuse. But my foster parents took it, and they told me, like, you're gonna sit there, you're gonna answer all of my questions, you're gonna open the envelope, and you're gonna read it in front of us, and then we're gonna have a good conversation. Meaning, actually, we will humiliate you on the spot and make you feel small. And I didn't want to feel that again, so I stood up for myself. I said, no, I'm not gonna open up the envelope because it has my name on it. You violated my rights. And actually, because they have so much power as a child, you're beneath the institutions and the foster parents. You have no voice. So actually, when I said no, they said, oh, okay, you're going to see what's going to happen. We're going to call CPS tomorrow, and you will be placed to another home. And it was actually in the weeks of my exams, and my brother was left behind. And 5 days after, I was placed somewhere else, and that ended up being with my mother, which was very crazy because my whole life I have been told you could never live with your mom because she could never take care of you. And suddenly I'm with my mother, and it's it was so unbelievable, the abuse. um yeah, it's even hard to find words for it because it's I can remember it, but what I want to say is, um, you cannot speak out, or your voice is not being heard. For all of the children in the orphanage too, no one sees you as a person or as a child, as a normal child. So when a CPS worker comes by, they they don't see you. They are just taking notes, but they actually write down things, but they don't listen to you. And if you say you're abused, they don't believe you. They didn't believe me too. And that's how the the abuse, the child abuse, is going on in a circle, because the child when the child speaks out, it gets placed somewhere else because the people with power can do it, and the people who are abusing can still go on. And it actually happened to my little sister recently. She went to her mentor in school, and she told her she was abused in her foster home. And when she came back from home, they said, "Oh, pack your bags. You're leaving. We're going to place you somewhere else." So um, that was really traumatizing for her too. And um, actually, you're not even involved when there's a lawsuit going on. So with legal procedures, you're not even involved when it's about your own life. So no one asks you to speak in front of a judge. So all those decisions made about your life, you cannot say anything about it. It just happens. So when you wait, so what's important for me is just like, what are my points? I want children to be heard when they are speaking out, that they are so that they are abused, that are being heard, and that they are being believed. Because right now, no one believes us. You're seen as less, and that's why, yeah, the 75%, so many abuse is happening. And this is only the open institutions. You have the closed ones, and those are even worse. So it could even get worse. So that's how bad it is. And for me, when you ask me, yeah, what do I want to change? It was actually, let me be honest. When this cue was first put to me, I was triggered. I thought, really? You adults made a mess. You adults put me in a place, a system that is broken. You adults muzzled me. And then you ask to use my voice to offer you solutions on a plate. Like, am I together with Muhammad? So the thing is, um, at this moment, not only does nobody listen to you, but we're being viewed as objects that legal subjects have entitlements to. The essence of child rights is that we are viewed as independent, autonomous bearers of rights. I too ensure this. I would like to suggest that new legal functionalities are brought into existence. Concretely, lawyers, attorneys that exclusively help children, lawyers in children's lawyers that are specialized in children's rights, lawyers who are then not allowed to take cases furthering the interest of the caregivers, because that's what's happening now. Nothing else. Wait. The pure interest of children and child rights should be at heart, nothing else. We need strategic litigations, and I'm very willing to be the first case in the Netherlands for that. Thank you.
Jaden, thank you so much. You didn't need to come and speak to us, but we really appreciate that you did, because you have brought really to the forefront what is important that we're paying close attention to as a panel, as a conference today. And you remind us of the reasons why we are here and why we need to change. And I know when we spoke yesterday, part of what we were speaking about was that you raised was the urgency of this, that this is not sort of, let's see how we go for 5 more years. You're saying, no, it's right now this needs to happen. And your experience, I think, reminds us of how important it is that we're doing the changes that need to be done now. So can I just say thank you again from all of us, and will you please feel very welcome on this panel as an equal with us, to be helping to come in with your comments on what others are saying, and how that lands. And thank you again for your contributions. And I'm gonna be quiet now and ask Kira to take on from here. Thank you.
I would like to welcome the next speaker is Dr. Najat Majid. I'll reintroduce her again. She's the Secretary General's Special Representative on Violence Against Children and the Chair of the United Nations Task Force on Children Deprived of Liberty. I would like to ask you the first question. 15 years after the establishment of your mandate and 5 years after the UN Global Study, what are the persisting challenges and progress achieved you identify in the area of institutional care?
Thanks. I think after listening, Jaden, I'm not sure that really we need to focus on challenges. For me, what it's important is within the mandate also is addressing children's care as integral part of ending violence against children. This is very important. It's not a part. The other things that made me having many concerns, allow me, I'm not going to react, but I want to react to Jayden first, because what we are seeing, and even in the wealthy countries, and this is what, because it happens in Netherlands, if I am not wrong here, it's really, you know, it becomes a market, to be very frank, and I'm a little bit surprised regarding that child protection services that normally have to protect children. And first, the big issue that we see is a family separation that was really, it's crazy how it was done with police and so on, and without explaining, listening, instead of really seeing how we can prevent family separation and provide family support and accompany these children and this family. So because this is the case, in many places, many children are placed in institution because of poverty, because of family problem. I'm not speaking about family who are violent, and they are put and we forget them. The other issue that I am seeing, and we are seeing it also in as challenge, is also the fact that, you know, children are not seen as, you know, as right holders, not listened. The other issue, the big issue of abuse in this foster care in institution, they cannot report, and we are seeing it in many institutions worldwide, and this is a big issue regarding how children can report and to have access to child sensitive based on complaint mechanism that are based on confidentiality, on safety, and this is a big issue. This is one. The other point is when they are, you know, denouncing, they are moving from one foster care to one. As pediatrician, I can tell you that this trauma, moving from one foster family to one foster family, is not helping really to build a life project. And the other issue I heard is also the fact that you, at one moment, you were using the word orphanage, and and in the same time you have a mom. So and here we something is going wrong. I didn't see during all this time, because you spend a lot of time, how, you know, in many cases what it's important is how we can keep, you know, the relationship with the family. This is very important, and how we can accompany children and family, and to build. He has to see his mom, if I'm not wrong, one per month. Something is really going wrong. Separating, you know, children and their siblings. This is another big issue. And in the same time, what made me having concern, we are seeing in many places, that it's an easy solution for, you know, people. You know, it's a child have a problem, you have to put it here. Another issue that it was not highlighted as challenges, but you have many children who have disabilities who are placed also in institution because of disabilities. And we know that you have another possibility really to take care of the children. You have children on street situation who are placed, you know, behind walls. You have children also currently, and I am seeing it also in advanced countries, what we call children with behavioral disorders. That made me having a big concern, because I don't understand what means this behavioral disorder, and I am a specialist on it, so something is going wrong. Because they are adolescent and they have some behavior, and we know that adolescents have at risky behavior. So instead of listening, accompanying, you know, making these children and the adolescent trust in the system, they are put in institution again. And I think we have to be very careful about, you know, this institutionalization, and it is why it's important since the beginning, you know, and pushing, and it is regarding the challenge, is really pushing to have alternative to institutionalization. And alternative to institutionalization means first avoiding family separation. This is important. Family support, community-based, and listening to children, because it's in their best interest. And I think it's important. Another issue we highlight, and what we are seeing as challenges, many children stay until 18 years. And suddenly at 18 years, 1 second, they have to leave without life project. So what I am telling, we have good example currently in many countries to push the alternative to institutionalization, but we have to be very careful. It is why for me it's important to really work to not dissociate better care, social welfare, and child protection. And the most important thing is really listening to children and seeing them as part of the solution. Did you realize when a child was not trusted once, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. He never trusts an institution. And this, the trauma is, and when he was speaking about having remedies and compensation, I think it's not only about that. It's need really an ongoing, you know, psychological support, life projects, building this relationship. We are destroying children. We have to be very careful. And for me, it has to be the last resort. And also, I think we have to be very careful. Allow me, at what I am seeing, we have more and more what we call, you know, alternative care, and we have family care, and so we need to be to control all these people. Sorry, because it's not normal to make sure that these people are deciding. And I think it's really becoming, you know, for me, a business. And we have to be very careful regarding this. Is the case of institution. And you have other things that are challenging in other countries when you have a lot of orphanage, and you have also all the volunteerism, and you have all the trafficking, and you have many children who are really sold to be illegally adopted. So we are seeing very bad things. So really, for me, it is why within my mandate is really pushing, you know, to have this alternative to institutionalization. And we are seeing it now, but I think at the same time, in the countries and mainly in Europe currently, this is where it's a high, you know, number of really regarding number of children in institution. I think it's important at the same time to prevent it, but in the same time to see how we are going to repair and to make sure that these children who were in this institution during many years, we are going to support them. It's not only about money, it's not about remedies, it's really accompanying them. And this is very, very important. So these are my preliminary impressions.
Najat, thank you. I think there's so much for us to be taking in and what you're saying. I think we're still taking in what Jaden you've shared with us. So let's carry those into the next presentation and hold this for all of us. Part of what we've heard this morning and just now has been the sort of interconnection around how do we start in the first place to ensure that families are supported, families who are facing poverty are supported. Miata from Liberia earlier was reminding us about discrimination, about poverty and social isolation contributing in a huge way to undermining where we want children's rights. And so with that in mind and the intersectionality of the lives of children that we're talking about here who are placed in institutions, I'm really delighted to be hearing next to be inviting Iris Amaldi from ATD Fourth World to speak, who will be telling us about speaking to that question about the place of poverty driving unnecessary care. And so Iris, welcome. And our question to you is as follows. Institutional care prevents children from enjoying their rights to identity and family relations, as they're often unnecessarily separated from families, which we've heard very powerfully from Jaden and Najat just now. Can you, I'm reading the wrong question. Yes. That's hilarious. How long do you think I might have gone in before I finished? Nigel's going, that's not my question. I'm just going to read, I'm going to start again. You are ATD Fourth World, Iris, and we are interested to know about the important new research that you've taken on building a future for children living in poverty. Can you tell us about what you found, please, and how you undertook this participatory action research? We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah. So thank you. I'm glad to be here and to amplify the voices of children and parents who live in poverty and have experienced placement and alternative care. We must say that over the past 30 years, ATD Fourth World have seen little progress and sometimes setbacks in reforming child protection system in Europe. Here are the words of Frederick from Switzerland. I was placed into care. My daughter was placed into care. My granddaughters were placed into care. When will it stop? Why does it repeat itself? Because we are unemployed, because we have no money, we are immediately judged. We are working with Frederick since long years, And so we know very well the story of the families, and this cycle is really incredible. And it was because of this indignation and frustration of parents that an international coordination team was formed in 2019, and the participatory research Building a Future for Children Living in Poverty was launched in 7 countries: Belgium, France, the Netherlands, Poland, Spain, Switzerland, and United Kingdom. How did we carry out the study? Young parents living in poverty formed discussion groups with academics from a variety of disciplines who had already worked with people living in poverty. The objectives of the research were, first, to enable people living in poverty to express the richness of the ties that binds them to their children. That's what you were saying. And what weakens these ties and what weakens the parents. Second of all, to identify key points in their lives, as well as the system that perpetuates extreme poverty and social exclusion. And third, to develop avenues for action and proposal for change that is very needed and very quickly. The participants did not speak the same language in the research, because we are in different countries. They live in different countries with different laws and institutions, and often had little time for activism. Some of the reflections were developed through interviews of parents. Other groups met in what ATD called people universities, les universitaires non populaires, where people in poverty meet and discuss with people of other sectors of the society. All the groups used as a common framework the research, the hidden dimension of poverty, an international participatory study by ATD First World and Oxford University. Each of the group was put in touch with a group of another country doing the research, exchanging notes and meeting online and in person. They also met with academics at regular intervals. The final stage was a session in which all groups were brought together at the ATD headquarters outside Paris in November 2023. So the research lasted 4 years. What did the study find? The number of institutions has decreased, but these institutions have too often been replaced by placement in foster care or by forced adoption, which also cause a lot of harm to the children and suffering of their families. The system appears unable to differentiate between, on one hand, the removal of children due to sexual abuse or other physical violence, which occurs at all levels of the society, and on the other hand, protective measures based on parents' lack of formal education or poverty, which limits their ability to provide adequate food, clothing, housing, or education for the children. The system also doesn't seem capable of combining child protection with overcoming poverty and exclusion, nor does it seem capable of preventing temporary separation measures for becoming permanent in majority of cases involving families who live in poverty. After all this work, we led a series of proposals for concrete change in the field of child protection that I will discuss later.
Please continue. Tell us what those findings were, Iris. Thank you.
So as the research progressed, the participants gradually identified 2 major areas where changes is needed in the field of child protection, 2 special areas. The first one is the invisibility of poverty. This is what we were speaking. People are invisible. One doesn't see the poverty, and it's silenced. For parents, the first change is the need to make poverty visible by highlighting the consequences of being made invisible. For example, unrecognized institutional and social maltreatment and the suffering of people living in unsafe conditions. The proposal that some of the proposal, I cannot list all the proposal, we have lots. The one that I think it's important is that the people living in poverty and the families and the children said is changing the name of the Child Protection Service to Family Support Service, because this is what we want to see. We want to see a support of the family. Child protection implies in many people's minds that the child needs to be protected from the parents. And Andrea from Switzerland told us, changing the name would strengthen our ability to act, because we are seen as equal, and we have a power. This empowers. The other proposal is overhauling the training of all those who will work with people in poverty by including people living in extreme poverty as instructor. So you listen well, you hear well. It's not that, so we have to do the things together, and the people living in poverty, they have the knowledge, the families that struggle, they have a deep knowledge of the institution. And this knowledge has to be brought on the table, and the policy has to be developed together, and they have to be instructor, not only participate time to time. This is a completely shift what we have to do, and this is very important. If change is to be effective, training must target not only social workers, but also judges, like you said, lawyers, of course, mediators, and parents. And parents need to learn from one another. That's why we have a lot of group of parents also in Netherlands about their rights. Because if you know your rights, you can defend your rights, and you can say, no, this is my right, I can do that. And they can gain also confidence in their abilities, and this is very important. Now I would like to add 3 proposals that came out of the consultation with people living in poverty carried out by Olivier de Schutter, the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty, with whom we worked a lot. The first proposal that was in this report is additional support should be granted to families during the critical period of early childhood. We should start by the early childhood through such programs as maternity leave and universal child benefits. Second, ensure that children from a poorer social economic background are not subject to discrimination within the school system, as is often seen, but instead provided the support they need to succeed. Parents, we have seen that parents consider education as the key point for their children to be lifted from poverty and have a better future. So education, the states should really invest in these 2 things heavily, really. And then third, that I think also is very important, the discrimination on the grounds of social economic status should be added to the existing grounds that are forbidden by law. So discrimination must be really forbidden in the law. You cannot discriminate it because of ground of social economic, like gender, like other things. Voilà, discrimination because of poverty, this is very important. This is what was. Now, to come back to the proposal that are in this research that we did, there is a second major area that we have to address, and this area is to be addressed in the law. So we have to change the law. This is what you say. If we don't change the law, nothing will be changed. And so we have to give recommendation to states in order that we change the law. So parents living in poverty can actually exercise their fundamental rights, and these laws are enforced. Current laws and institutions tend to weaken the bonds between children and their parents, profound cultural shifts are required to facilitate the return of children to the home. Such changes should imply actions such as the following. First, a review of the child protection files. This is very important. Their content, accessibility, and function so that they provide a record of the family life, because the children, they need to know their story, they need to know what they happen, and this should include, for example, sharing the file with parent earlier. Second, efforts to ensure that placement are temporary, with the aim to reunify the family, because this has to be the aim. And third, a more fair hearing before the judge. For example, children should be heard prior to the hearing and have the right to be represented by a lawyer. And finally, the respect of the rights of both children and parents is key. Living together is a fundamental element of the right to family life. When a decision has to be made about a child, both rights have to be taken into account. The protection of the best interest of the child and respect for family life. Thank you very much.
Iris, thank you very much. You've given us such a helpful framing and allowing us to hear from families themselves about what their experiences are. And I know ATD Fourth World has engaged with those families over generations and has rich insights into those experiences. And now we're moving to from systems transformation to looking at accountability. Over to you, Kira.
The next speaker that I'm introducing is Dr. Pascal Krauthammer. He is the campaign director of the Swiss Reparations Initiative and the European Justice Initiative at the Council of Europe. He's speaking on learning from the European Justice Initiative and historical abuse justice and remedies.
Thank you so much for having me, first of all, thank you, Iris, for your great work. We work together with you in Switzerland, with ATD Garmont. You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you, Najat, Majid, for your analysis. It was amazing. But I want to thank especially Jaden. I was very moved by your testimony, and I was very moved by your courage to speak out. And I think you're a role model for many caregivers. Thank you so much, Jaden, first of all. We, the Justice Initiative, we are an organization that advocates for survivors of child abuse. And some of these survivors are now not like Jaden, they are 60, maybe 70 or 80 years old. And they experienced abuse in the last century, maybe in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And most of those people never spoken about their abuses and for decades. So thanks to our lobbying for our work, 12,000 Swiss survivors of abuse have received a compensation, a reparation, and the Swiss state have spent 300 million Swiss francs, about 350 million euros on this. Of course, that sounds great, but as a lawyer and a Swiss citizen, I would first like to make something clear. We often have an image of Switzerland as a stronghold of human rights, and I think it's not by chance, it's no coincidence that we are meeting here in Geneva. But children's rights have also been massively violated in Switzerland. These voices of survivors were not heard for years. I want to say something about the numbers. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of children and young adults in Switzerland were affected by abuses. So these are the numbers. And I'm going to give you some examples. Children known as Verdingkinder, en français dit les enfants placés. They are, in English you would say, contract children. They were forced to work on farms and exploited as cheap labor in Switzerland. That's the reality. Not so many years ago, maybe 50 years ago, they had to work on farms, and they often came from poor families. Same problem. So what happened on those farms? They were abused, physical abuse, psychological abuse, and lots of them sexually abused. Many of the girls, of course, but also of the boys. What happened to other children? Children were placed in strictly run residential institutions, or children's homes, as you call them, or labor institutions, just because they came from poor families. Or maybe one of the things we didn't talk about yet, mothers who weren't married, who gave birth to a kid, they were taken away, and the kid was taken to a children's home. There were also mothers, actually, who were forced in Switzerland to be sterilized because they were poor. And the state of Switzerland thought, well, they are a burden for the state of Switzerland. Let's sterilize them in Switzerland. And please be aware, because we have a very interesting Ciba-Geigy and all the other pharmaceuticals. What happened to children in Switzerland, from to children who were in institutions? Some of these children were subjected to medical experimentation. This is well documented. I say this as a lawyer, as a former journalist. This is well documented in Switzerland. This happened in Switzerland. So the interesting thing was these abuses were made taboo. The institutions, of course, didn't want to talk about it. And of course, I have to talk about it. The church didn't want to talk about it because many of these institutions were run by the church. The state didn't want to talk about it because they were afraid of reparations, of course. And of course, the farmers didn't want to talk about it because if you talk at this Heidi image of Switzerland, this doesn't fit in. Huh? These farmers who abused kids as cheap labor and abused them sexually. Well, what did we do? We started a so-called political initiative, a popular initiative. We have this possibility in Switzerland. We had to collect 100,000 signatures. And in the beginning, everybody told us, you won't be able to do it. It won't be possible in Switzerland because you're going to have the church against you, you're going to have the conservative parties against you. But nevertheless, we tried. We tried to do it. And it was interesting because more and more people understood that we have to look at these crimes. And after a certain time, we got the 100,000 signatures. It became a movement. It became a movement, and the movement became so strong that as a politician, you couldn't say, I don't support it anymore. So that was the interesting thing of the lobbying that we did. So in the end, the parliament decided that these survivors, victims of abuse, would get a compensation, a reparation of each 25,000 euros. But more important actually was a letter by the state that acknowledged that these people are victims. Victims as defined by law, survivors. So as you know, boys and girls that are raped, for example, often they have the feeling, it's my fault, maybe I did something wrong. But with this letter, they understood they are just survivors and nothing else. And that was much more important than the money they became. And extremely important was, besides that, we had an investigation. It was a Nationalfonds-Studie. There was 80 million Swiss francs or 20 million euros, for example, was invested. So it was investigated, why did these crimes happen? So that we could learn from the past for the future. Something needs to change. When Jaden tells me his story, how he was separated from his family, this trauma, what happened to him in the institution, it reminds me on the same stories, and you must know it, Iris, as well, the same stories I hear time after time from all the other people in the institution 60 years ago. And I traveled all over Europe and I heard all the same stories because there was no investigation. People are not interested in the past, so how can they build the future? For me personally, I need to say, for me, the most beautiful thing about this reappraisal that we experience in Switzerland is when I was a young man, I was once a young man, I made a Matura, Baccalaureate. We didn't know anything about these abuses that happened in the institution. Maybe Iris, you didn't know anything about. We didn't talk about it. Nowadays, my kids learn about it in school. Nowadays, nowadays we have plays, we have films. It's part of the booklets in school nowadays. So things are changing. And that's the interesting thing about it. Nowadays, we had a gathering lately with 800 survivors of abuse, together with our Justice Minister, Beat Jans. And these 800 abusers nowadays can say, we are part of the Swiss history. And I make it very shortly because I know we are short on time. The interesting thing is that the Swiss process of reappraisal was observed with great interest in the neighboring countries. So different victims or survivor groups came to us, children's protection groups came to us, and they said, we want to do something else, something similar in Europe. We want to have similar solutions in Europe. So we said we're going to support that. We have nowadays about a dozen hubs in different European countries. And we were lobbying at the Council of Europe. And on January 26th of this year, the Council of Europe, to which 46 states with over 600 million citizens belong, voted in favor of dealing with the past cases of abuse along the lines of Switzerland. Of course, this is soft law. So now we are working in the different states that they're going to implement this resolution 2533. We had 1 week ago, we had a big conference in Strasbourg at the Council of Europe. And thanks to Najat, she also had a wonderful thing. Thank you so much. You gave a video statement. It was very important to us as well. We had about 150 participants, politicians from all over Europe, ministers, ambassadors, who wanted to know how they could do it in their country as a member state of the Council of Europe, how they can do it in line with the Swiss solution. And it's interesting. I'm invited to go to Bosnia, to other countries. They are really interested in doing the same thing. So I'm extremely grateful to the organizers of this amazing, amazing conference here. Alex and his team, thank you so much for what you are doing. I think it's extremely important. And the last thing that I want to finish is not Jaden. I hope you heard me how proud I am of you. But I always also want to name Adam, who was asking, why are they not listening to children? And Adam, you're there. Thank you. And I really think that's the reason why we are here, really, to listen to you and to change things. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pascal, for your contribution and for your work. We have the pleasure now of hearing from Karabo Ozah from the Center for Child Law at the University of Pretoria, known to many of you perhaps. Karabo, although South Africa has performed really well in some ways in reducing numbers of children in correctional centers, your center found that there remained a considerable number of children in secure care centers back in 2018. Can you tell us about your findings and what we can do to strengthen accountability to children in institutions? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you to everyone for this opportunity. Maybe let me start by saying that as a follow-up to that global study on children deprived of liberty, we managed to secure some funding to go into our secure care centers in South Africa. And for that, we're grateful to the Global Campus of Human Rights, as well as the Right Livelihood Foundation, who made it possible for us. So we undertook a study over 2 years to go and visit a secure care center. So in South Africa, those are places where you have children who have been accused of crimes, awaiting trial, children who've been sentenced, and as well as children who are in something we call residential diversion. So we went into the institutions. In 2018, the numbers were that we had about 948 children in the whole country who were in these secure care centers. But when we went now in 2022, the numbers had gone up instead of going down. And what's worrying about the numbers is the fact that most children who are in there are awaiting trial, so they haven't been sentenced. So we had about 469 children awaiting trial, very serious concern. We had 271 children who had been sentenced. And then we had 230 children who have been put on what is called institutional diversion, which our Child Justice Act makes provision for. Now, this is where children are supposed to be placed in the institutions for purposes of getting some vocational training, education, and therapeutic remedies. But this number is very concerning for us, as it looks like children are quickly put into this residential diversion rather than keeping them in their families and making them go on diversion that you can do while children are in their communities. So when we went to the facilities across South Africa, some of the key findings, apart from the numbers that have gone up, was the conditions, obviously, of detention. There are a lot of challenges in relation to what happens to children while they're in these facilities. To start with, at some point we felt like children are being warehoused. So they are, they are there. Yes, they are fed. They're barely clothed. Some children actually expressed how they were given clothes just before we visited because everybody knew that we were coming. They were challenges in relation to the rehabilitation programs, and this is very important because, we were talking earlier with Manu, and you were saying, well, we shouldn't just say conditions should be better. We should say children should not be there. But nonetheless, when children are there, the purpose of that place is to rehabilitate them. So what we found in South Africa is that little to no rehabilitation really takes place. Children are there on programs that don't really help them to really change their lives and improve themselves so that they minimize the risk of them coming back into those facilities when they go back into their communities. We've found very concerning attitudes by the people who are meant to look after the children, apart from the fact that most of them did not have proper training to work with these children. In addition, they had attitudinal problems. And just to highlight some of the things that the children kind of shared with us in relation to how they felt about being in those places. There were things like children, when they complain about their conditions or how they've been treated, they were called, "You making trouble," and some were told, "Oh, do you think you are special?" So those are the kind of views that people have who are being actually given the obligation to look after children. No consideration of children's dignity and safety, and also how they're caring for them. And here I want to highlight the issue of indignity that for us still remains, a big issue, and I'll tell you about what the plans are going forward in relation to this work. But what we found was the fact that there are still strip searches being conducted on these children in these facilities. There's lack of complaints procedures, but as I said, when the children complain, they're asked, what makes you special? Why do you think you are special? And there's a very punishment-orientated approach in these facilities. Never really rehabilitation, never really therapeutic, but more that, well, you guys are troublemakers anyway, that's why you're here. And right from even the security guard who is manning the gate at the facilities, some of my colleagues, when they were saying, right from the security guard, they're like, oh, why do you want to come see these children who are troublemakers? So total kind of lack of considering these children as children, and these places really functioning as places where children are supposed to be being able to get assistance. One of the things that also worried me, and I know we're talking about children generally, but there is a big issue as well. I think it was mentioned about the mothers and the women getting into facilities, but these facilities were not created with a gender lens in mind. Like when you get into the facilities, the girls are usually small numbers, but they get the worst treatment, right? Because the places are not geared for them. Sometimes girls, because there's like, let's say 100 boys and you're the two girls, and they will not mix you. They will rather make you go to a corner somewhere where they can just fit you, because what else can they do when you place there? And that also, is seen also in relation to how girls are not provided for instance, sanitary pads. And when they ask for more, they're told, well, this is not your mother's house. Why must we give you so many? And the sanitary pads are counted and things like that. So those are the kind of lived realities of these children in these institutions. And I mean, I know we're all painting a doom kind of picture, but that is the reality. And I think we all agree that if we're going to help children, we need to actually reflect their lived realities without favor and fear. So having seen all these challenges, let me tell you, so that the purpose really of the study was to say, we know under OPCAT, and most of you are familiar with OPCAT, there is an obligation to monitor facilities for torture, degrading treatment, and all that. So in South Africa, that obligation to monitor falls under our Human Rights Commission, and they have what we call the National Preventive Mechanism. And we were concerned that, when they visit these facilities, there's like a tick boxing, which we found is truly like a tick boxing, like literally counting, oh, did they eat? Yeah. Is the food really good for them? It's balanced meal, yes. But nobody actually talks to children about how they strip search, they are put in isolation, they are beaten for asking for things, or, all those kind of things. So we were going in there not only to just highlight the conditions, but to say we need a monitoring system that's better. So the NPM is there, but it's not really geared towards children. So how do we make sure that then you change the NPM to make it child rights based, to make it child centered, and more so to make sure that those visits are done with a different purpose and a different lens, and in the end really can ensure that children are safe for as long as they're in those places, who are anyway supposed to be a measure of last resort. So we developed what we call a monitoring framework, which is available on our website, and I can share later, where we propose certain approaches. So reminding the government and the people who are in charge, what is the purpose of incarcerating the children, so that they don't see it as this punitive kind of warehousing of children, but saying that, the purpose is to provide therapeutic services, to correct the behavior, to ensure that children at least don't end up coming back, or maybe commit offenses when they become adults. We also created guiding principles that must inform how these places are monitored. Very important, because the monitoring is, that had been taking place was done by people who really, for lack of a better word, know nothing about children's rights and have no child-centered approach. And also we said that part of that must include that when you do the monitoring, there's a specialized team that goes into these facilities, but that also there should be phases to the visit. So there must be a proper preparation phase of saying, well, we're going to the facilities. What is the purpose? Who's going to do what? What are we looking at? During that time that you're there, make sure that you engage with everybody, and that also that there's a safe space created for children to voice out their concerns. This became a big issue because, there is an issue about how when children voice out their concerns, after we leave or after people leave, then their children are at the receiving end of reprisals. So that's why then there's a third phase that is important, which is going back and checking and actually having a mechanism where people can account as to what have they done to make the lives of children better. So, in a nutshell, that's kind of the model that we created. Now, this was last year. We launched, we were hoping we could launch a model with the powers that be. However, there wasn't that much commitment, but we as a Center for Child Law anyway did a soft launch of it. And we shared it with the relevant government departments and said, look, these are the findings. This is the model. You have to now start doing something. There was a kind of a commitment where they said they're going to come up with what they call implementation plans as to how they're going to respond to the problems, but also then align themselves with the monitoring and oversight model. Unfortunately, that has not taken place. We are now at a place where there are some areas where we think we might even have to resort to litigation to better the circumstances of children who are in these facilities. There are places where we have tried to engage with even our national preventative mechanism with little outcome, which is very concerning for us. So we've created this model, and as it is one, and with buy-in, let me put it that way, buy-in from the national preventative mechanism, but now they're also the people who are not even helping to implement it, which is very concerning. So what we'll also be doing going forward, we'll make sure that when they report to Parliament, we're there to make a writing and reports to Parliament to say, well, what are they doing in relation to this area of their obligations? We'll definitely make sure that we do alternative reports when they report on OPCAT to find out how there's still gaps and how they're not protecting the rights of children. And as I said, lastly, one of the things that we are definitely looking at is that there are key areas where we think it may be time to litigate to improve the conditions of the children in the facilities. Thank you.
Karabo, thank you so much. And especially if I can just come back around to the mechanisms you were sharing with us about how to hold these institutions and government to account, which is so important in the broader picture of institutions for care purposes and how we hold those to account. And I really appreciated hearing about how complaints could be safely shared by children in those situations and the 3 stages of follow-up and being very sensitive to ensuring children can really have a genuine voice to be sharing what's happening to them, which we know from Jaden, from many others, that is very difficult to achieve for children. So thank you so much for that. Hand over to Kira. Thanks.
Last and but not least, I would like to welcome Nigel Cantwell, who is the DCI founder and the prime NGO actor in the writing of UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and he will specifically talk about a child's right to identity. The first question I have for you is, institutional care prevents children from enjoying their right to identity in family relations, as they are often unnecessarily separated from their families. Please tell us how are children's identity rights relevant for those in alternative care?
Thanks very much. I'm going to start by setting the right to identity in a historical perspective, because I think it's absolutely vital, if we're going to use rights to the fullest extent possible, that we understand where the rights came from and what the at least the initial intention was of having those rights in a text. Now, this may sound extremely legalistic after many testimonies of a very practical nature, but I think it's the value added that I can make to the debate that we're having, or to the discussion that we're having. So Article 7, which sets out the right to identity, was initially focused uniquely on name, nationality, and birth registration. In other words, that was the basis of identity that was being considered at the time. But several countries, particularly Latin American countries, but others as well, were concerned that there should be a mention of the family in this connection. The word family had to be in the Convention on the Rights of the Child in this particular article in relation to identity. And they put forward the proposal that there be a reference to family identity. But this worked for their legal system, but it didn't work for other legal systems where the term, the concept of family identity was not recognized. So we set up a working group, and in the end, they came out with this idea of family relations as being one component of a child's whole identity. We never actually got to the stage of discussing what family relations might actually mean, but we do know now, and the testimonies here have also demonstrated that. We realize how important the notion of family relations, however we might want to conceive of it in different societies, in different ways, we see how important that is to a child's well-being, and therefore how important this Article 7 is to children in general. Also in Article 7, we have the reference to the child's rights to know and to be cared for by his or her parents wherever possible, with the emphasis being on being cared for by one's parents is the norm, and it would only be in exceptional circumstances that you deny the child's rights to be cared for by his or her parents. So that's the kind of framework that we're looking at in terms of the use, if you like, or the potential use of the child's right to identity and family relations as one argument to be put forward in the battle to deinstitutionalize our care system. So that's the first part of my response on this. I think in the past, possibly 10, but more especially 5 years, we have come to realize precisely how important, how significant the use of or the employment of the arguments based on identity can be as I say, one component of the advocacy that we can make in favor of deinstitutionalization. And let me give you just very quickly, because I know we're extremely short of time and I'm short of breath. Let me give you just 4 examples of how the issue of identity can be jeopardized, or the respect for identity in family relations can be jeopardized by the care system. The first one is quite simply that children may be placed in an institution or even in foster care far from the family, which makes it virtually impossible for the family relations to be maintained. And in addition, in some cases, institutions actually deter contact between the child and his or her family. And I think that your experience, where you said that you had contact, you were allowed to have contact once a month with your family, that's an enormous deterrent to the maintenance of family relations. So that's the first thing. The second one is, and this relates to what Najat was saying about the privatization of the care system, where parents are persuaded or manipulated into sending their child to an institution because they will have education, because they will have a better life, etc., etc. And very often lose track of them after they are sent to this institution, which again may be in the capital, hundreds of miles from a village in such and such a country. And again, the system is that the child will lose, little by little, the child will lose that contact, or even abruptly will lose that contact with his or her family. So that's the second one. The third one is obviously that children may be put up illegally for adoption while they're in an institution. So often we hear of children who have been placed for adoption, very often abroad, once they were received into an institution with the consent, but very much in inverted commas, of the birth family. So that's another one. And the final one is partly linked to that, and that is the falsification and loss, or maybe falsification, inadequacy and loss of documentation of records of that child's relationships with his or her family. Very often they end up, in many cases, they end up as being registered as abandoned in these institutions, whereas they have obviously family with whom they should have a relationship. So those are the kind, I mean, these are just 4 examples, there are many others, but those are the kinds of things where we can, and we actually should, rather than just can, we should be invoking the child's right to identity, and particularly the child's right to the family relations component of that advocacy. I think if we do that, we can be more effective, even more effective, let's say, in our work to deinstitutionalize the care system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigel. We started 15 minutes late, so we're not going to be racing to finish at the moment. Just so you know, you can continue to relax in your seat and be engaged in such a important range of comments. Can I take a few minutes just to ask the panel if anyone would like to come in on any of the things that have been said since you spoke, or if you want to come back on anything in particular or emphasize anything in particular that has been said that we're wanting to hold on to. And then I'm also noting that Pascal, thank you. I know you have to go for a train, so please don't feel obliged. And we will close with Jaden and Kira with their final comments. But first, let's open it up to the panel. Najat.
I will really very brief and just regarding, alternative, to institutionalization. And I think in the word first, under institutionalization, we have many understanding. And we have also to be very, to clarify what we mean. But we know, as highlighted by Nigel, that it's many countries are doing their best. We need also to recognize the efforts, and many are pushing for alternative to institutionalization. It's not easy, to be very frank, but many of them are doing it. But in the same time, what is important for us, we need also to put it in the context of not opposing, and when I was hearing you, the right of children and the right of family, because this is a big debate currently, just to let you know, worldwide. And I think it's really important to see how we can keep these family relationships. This is one. The other issue that was highlighted, you cannot put it, stop alternative to institutionalization only by closing. You need to address the root causes. And we heard drivers, we heard many things. It's about social justice. We heard also about the fact that you have many children who are in correctional center or rehabilitation center and for pre-trial because they are troublemakers, and we have more and more. And we heard also, I think what is important, we are seeing more and more family support program. And for me, what is important is really to make sure that social protection, family support, building relationship is linked with child protection. This is very important. You cannot do that without that. I have another point that it's really important is how children are involved in the decision-making processes. This is very important. And at all steps, because the best interest is the other point is the profile and the quality of all this social workforce, really those who are working in protection. This is also another big issue. And last but not the least is to make sure that all the programs that are, feeding into alternative to institutionalization in preventing has to be informed by the voices of children, youth, and survivor. This is very important because we learned a lot. And I have only one point related to church, because we are pushing a lot regarding, child safeguarding issues. But my question also is, yes, remedies, but for me, healing need to make sure that those who commit this crime are prosecuted. So sorry. For me, we cannot have healing, only, by, letter or some money. This, really, to be very frank, we need, and it will be preventive also, because something is going wrong. And for me, these people who did that have to pay for it and really to be prosecuted. This is my main point. Thank you.
Thank you, Najat. So we will think about this. I'm so glad there's questions. However, I'm going to ask you to hold those questions and bring them to the breakout session, because I've just been asked for us to be finishing up. And I don't want to shorten any opportunity for Jaden and for Kira to comment. And so I'm not sure if the two of you know who would like to go first in your final reflections from the session, but I will offer to you to let us know.
So I've heard many different things. What really spoke to me was prevention, and also, yeah, trying to fix the system. But what's the most important thing for me is that children get access to justice, because right now it isn't happening at all. And that, for me, it was the most important thing. And there was no person for me to go to that was standing up for my rights. And also another thing that's really important, you don't even know your rights because they aren't even told. So I didn't even know how to file a simple complaint, let alone starting lawsuit. So it's for a child impossible to get access to justice. And also I have a request because I think it's very important because we have the International Convention on the Rights of the Child, that it should become leading in all of the policies concerning children, because right now they are being ignored and violated massively. Really, in the child system, it could make a really big change. That there's a change in the law that would force the system to change and let children speak, let them be heard, and also, yeah, get access to justice. So that's my, yeah, point. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaden, very much. And Kira, would you like to give us your reflections? Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to comment on further on what Jaden has said through his speech. Thank you for telling your story again. Jaden and I also spoke to each other the day before when we realized we have to be on this panel. And what we really want to focus on is unspoken abuse, because unspoken abuse can happen in places and institutions where you least expect. It's not something a person can recognize with their own eyes, and it typically happens in situations where institutions are responsible to care for the child, to protect the child, but all of this is on paper. No one would think to question the actions and intentions of the institution, nor do a lot of people have a lot of power to overthrow these institutions. This type of abuse is very hard for children to even realize that it is happening, because the institution is carrying out their own agenda on what to do with the child's life and without the child's knowledge. The outcomes of their actions will blindside a child, and I'm talking about outcomes including legal results defining lives of children on short and long term, against which a child has no recourse. The inevitable consequence of such covert life-changing actions is damaging to their physical, psychological, and emotional well-being. Nonetheless, in these scenarios, there are very limited options to seek for help. Even more shockingly, the very first and fundamental requirement for seeking help and finding remedies is to be heard and believed by the adults when the children have the very courage to speak up, which is very few in the first place, but to come forward and voice their complaints. More often than not, those few that do are immediately neutralized. And to give you concrete examples of the country that I've been in the system, they qualify those who speak up as liars. Yep, thank you.
Kira, thank you for sharing your reflections as well. And thank you so much for being such a great co-moderator that kept me on track with when I went wrong, but also for the power of your voice. And Jaden, again, just thank you from all of us for your courage and for your honesty to be sharing what your experience has been for us to ensure we can make change happen. Can I ask everyone to extend a great big thanks to Nigel, to Najat, to Jaden, to Kira, to Karabo, to Iris, and to Pascal for such a thought-provoking session. And please join us in the breakout session tomorrow, where we really will be talking about this in much more detail. And we would really love to have all of your contributions to be thinking about this together. Thank you again so much to our panel.